We have to talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is the latest offering from OpenAI. It's a GPT, or Generative Pre-trained Transformer Style Model, specifically designed to engage with you via natural language. The best way that I can think of to tell you more about ChatGPT is to just show you. It's December 2022, and this is a research preview, so some behaviors, capabilities, and general characteristics are subject to change. The first obvious abilities for a model like this are to largely replace search engines for questions. For example, here we're asking for the steps to change the brake pads on a car, and we're getting back a pretty solid series of steps to do just that. We could spend a long time just on the search engine aspect of, how good is this model for this specific purpose? But this is just barely scratching the surface of what this style model and this model specifically can actually do. So let's go ahead and increase the complexity just slightly. GPT models can be influenced by what's called prompting. In the background, if you're trying to make a GPT model produce some specific output characteristics, it's going to do so based all on the input leading up to the point where you want to generate more of those tokens. And in this case, it's words. This initial information, the prompt, can be deliberately crafted to elicit behaviors that you're looking for. This is your main job when you're interfacing with an AI like this. It's not like these functionalities to be a search engine or any of the other things that I'm going to show you in this video are pre-built in to the model. At the end of the day, it is a language model attempting to behave like a generation of a chat log. That's what this model is, and it's your job to figure out how you can structure problems in such a way that this model really wants to keep doing whatever it is that you want it to actually do. So now let's start off by adding just a little bit of a layer of complexity here, and let's try a silly example where the AI gives us responses to questions always around the perspective of a dog. As you can see, throughout our conversation here, ChatGPT maintains responses to queries from the perspective of a dog and what a dog might think of XYZ. Obviously, this is kind of a silly little example, but maybe you have, something like a food recommendation application where your customers want to maybe input things like food allergies and other diseases that might affect maybe the food that they would be interested in. And you want all of your responses to kind of skew towards whatever that customer is. Sometimes you might even want to be more strict with your GPT models, and you may need to even provide an example to get the specific result or the exact result that you're seeking. So, for example, imagine that we have some price estimator app that we want to build with ChatGPT. We can open our conversation by first telling ChatGPT that it's a pricing AI and that all responses should be dollar amounts and nothing more. Sometimes ChatGPT can get a bit chatty, and we want to keep things concise. So we tell it exactly what we want from responses, and then we begin asking questions. As you can see, we can start off by actually asking how much something is, but then we can actually just transition to just saying that thing, and then ChatGPT responds with the price of that thing. We can do this for a wide range of items and even add modifiers and a follow-up, and ChatGPT even understands what we mean there correctly. While we do have GitHub Copilot, also created by OpenAI, I have found ChatGPT to be, in many ways, a far more advanced coding assistant. Basically, Copilot codes with you, ChatGPT can code for you. And there's a big difference there. Using plain language, we can just describe the program that we want. This step in the development process was actually doable with Copilot by just having maybe a comment at the top of the script that said exactly what the whole program was supposed to do. But from there, if you wanted to make modifications or a change or maybe an error is happening, you'd at least need to begin to know where to make that change and often where to remove code or add code and all of that. You would need to be somewhat of a programmer. We're not getting hints and suggestions here. ChatGPT is actually developing for us. After getting these clusters created, a reasonable person might want to, one, just see them visualized, and then two, probably realize that they really want to actually see them colored according to the category or the cluster that they belong to. We can just ask ChatGPT to please color them. In this case, interestingly enough, we wind up getting an error from the suggested code from ChatGPT. Now, with Copilot, we would be probably stuck here. This would not be something we could overcome. We would probably need to either use a search engine to figure out, or we might need to nudge the code a bit with some of our own knowledge if we have it. With ChatGPT, though, all we need to do is report the issue. So just copy and paste the error that we see. From here, ChatGPT actually fixes the issue for us, and it's done. It works exactly as we wanted, and we just quite literally naturally flowed through the entire development process through plain language. I will say most of the time it doesn't actually generate an error, but if it does, and I really just wanted to include this specific coding example because it did show an error, if it does, I just wanted to show how easily you can work around that, because Copilot does the same thing. It gives you errors or it just doesn't calculate something right. And the same thing is true here. If it produces something and it wasn't actually what you were looking for, you can describe what it's doing wrong, and it will actually change the code. And again, this is why I think ChatGPT is what I would call orders of magnitude better than Copilot, because it can engage in that development process with you, and like I said earlier, it literally develops for you. To your specification, and if you're having a problem, you just tell it kind of what the problem is. You're not really, you might be an engineer, but you're not programming. Let's check out one more example of ChatGPT's coding for you ability. Let's see if ChatGPT knows about Conway's Game of Life. Then can it just program all that for us? Yes, it can. Not too much of a surprise there, but probably the coolest part of Conway's Game of Life is seeing it. Let's ask for that. And again, all we're doing here is conversing. In order to visualize the Game of Life from here in the script, a handful of changes need to be made at different points in the code. We need to settle on what library will we even use and implement it. It's a decent undertaking. It's an entry-level programmer undertaking, but still, it's not something, again, that Copilot could not do this. Copying and pasting exactly what it just gave us, sure enough, it works, but it's a bit slow. Let's ask ChatGPT to speed this up for us. And what I really like here is not only does ChatGPT speed it up for us, it tells us how it was done in a way that we could easily just do this ourselves, potentially doing this going forward to set the speed. Now, there's also a lesser known but simpler way to update a graph like this in Matplotlib that I happen to know about. So if that is the case and you are a programmer, you can do something like this. So I can ask ChatGPT to use that method instead of the official kind of animation method. Again, this will require edits in the form of new code and removing other code in multiple places to produce this result. But ChatGPT does this very well. Continuing on, maybe we like this simpler method, but we don't like the colors, so we can just specify the colors that we want things to be instead. Again, this I believe would just be like a single line change, but still a change nonetheless. Now, maybe we change our mind and we want to use animation instead because it actually is faster to produce these charts. Note here that the output was cut off from this request. This happens sometimes. Either it might be because of a bug, maybe the sequence you asked for is just plain too long, or sometimes the AI actually thinks that was the end of the response. You can remedy this in a variety of ways, but typically just saying continue will be enough. It won't be formatted very beautifully necessarily, but it will finish it. Alternatively, you can sometimes ask it to just be more concise, and sometimes that will be enough to fit what you're looking for in context. And for example, with code, it'll often do something like maybe it'll tell you, replace this giant block of code, and it actually prints out that giant block of code with this other giant block of code, which obviously is going to take up a ton of space and cause problems. So in that example, you might just say, just give me the updated code only, or something like that. With our new code, interval is slow again, but we do know how to fix that. That said, we also might want it to be bigger, like the chart itself. Let's just ask ChatGPT to change both of those things for us. Okay, fix that, but it seems like our chart is back to a light theme. We can also just ask it to make it a dark theme again, and ChatGPT understands that we want that black background with cyan colored cells again. And that's just based on the history of our chat, and that was actually a few chats ago. We didn't need to re-specify the colors. This is subtle, but it's absolutely massive for just naturally conversing with I guess in this case, your software, but this is probably how you would converse with that entry-level programmer that you just replaced. So similar to previous examples already, I could definitely dive deeper into just this specific coding in Python example. But for now, let's move on to yet another interesting example and application. ChatGPT appears to want to resist doing things like asserting opinions, taking actions, and just in general, having any sort of will. And this seems to involve both logical and possibly other AI models to control the behavior. It definitely seems like some sort of check is being applied outside of that main ChatGPT model to look for instances where opinions are happening or maybe something controversial has come up or something like that. While OpenAI seems to have done a pretty good job at kind of tackling this problem, I think it's pretty futile for a GPT-style model that is so unbounded in this way. I think the goal from OpenAI is to not even give a hint that the AI is or could be sentient, or that it could break out, so to speak, onto the internet or something, but also so it's harder to spread disinformation or divisive content, that kind of stuff. I think they're trying to combat that problem or those problems. But because of these blocks, ChatGPT will often tell you that it doesn't do things like play games. This, again, appears to me to be a logical response likely based on some sort of confidence scoring of some AI model. This is a GPT-style model, and prompt engineering can just about always elicit behaviors that you seek, so it's just a function of figuring out just the right way to speak to our friend here. Now, I want to try a game of chess. Chess is something that I've been trying to get GPT-style models to play for years now. It's totally doable. Sometimes I can get one or two moves out of them before they're spitting out total gibberish or just invalid moves entirely. The best models I've had basically get 1-2 moves in, and most models are gibberish. The way a GPT model can play chess is through chess notation. There are books, websites, forums, and more, all dedicated to chess and sharing successions of moves through chess notation, so you can be very confident that these models have at least seen it. It's not a huge part of their training data, but they've seen it. They understand, at least to some extent, what that information is. So we'll start off with a common starting board with 2 pawns out and the notation for those. Here, I'm also just trying to see, can I influence the behavior of play as well? I had already tried this specific example and saw that it was at least going out a few steps. So then I started to wonder, well, is there a way to maybe cut the game short enough that we could actually get to the point where we win a game? So I'm trying to make it very aggressive. The other thing is stressing that I want nothing more from the ChatGPT outputs other than the very next move in chess notation. This is very similar to what I did with the PriceBot example. We're just trying to, no commentary, no chit chat, just give me the move that you want to play. Doing this, we actually get 10 moves into a game of all valid moves before seeing our first invalid move. I can also report that the behavior of play did seem to get, I guess you could say aggressive, but unwise, I think, would probably be the better choice. And if I continue testing here, I would likely revert to a model, at least to start, that does not try to influence behavior, because the one that I had tried right before this was it was making much more intelligent moves. So anyway, more research to be done there, but just take that into account. Now, the first time we get an invalid move, we're able to actually correct it by telling ChatGPT that's not a valid move. Please try again. Sure enough, we actually get through this and another move is provided to us, but pretty quickly we get more and more invalid moves around the 13th set of moves. And then eventually by the 15th set of moves, I reach a point where I can't seem to get any more valid moves out of the model. Unfortunately, we did not beat the AI here, the other chess AI that is. But this is by far the furthest I've ever been with a GPT model trying to play chess. This is a model that can program, it can come up with recipes for things, it can give medical and legal advice, but probably if you read the terms of service, you shouldn't follow the advice, and so on. It can just also play a bit of chess too. My guess is with a bit more research here, I think I could improve performance further. And again, that would be done through prompting. It might also just be better than this particular example, and it's just anecdotally bad here, or the other way around. ChatGPT is available to the public for a limited time, and I have no idea how long, so I can't spend too long on any one thing as I'm poking around. Also, without an API and the chat demo taking very long sometimes, it's quite tedious to do any in-depth testing on any one of these specific examples. But all that said, this is definitely a massive leap forward in performance for this extremely niche task. So when generative models first came onto the scene, I'm talking like 5 years ago, like the earliest of the generative models, at least deep learning generative models, the kind of holy grail was, can it just generate code? That was always like the thing everyone always wanted to do when there was a generative model. Can we show it a bunch of examples of code and can it produce code? And then eventually things were producing what looked very much like code, but it wasn't runnable. And then it became runnable. And then basically Copilot came around and pretty much sealed the whole generative code problem. This is just a thing generative models can do now. So I've had to figure out what are the things that I am going to try on the latest and greatest generative models to figure out, have we actually made significant progress in capabilities? Again, of very niche things, but this is how I test them. And the other thing, besides chess, that I've been trying to consistently test models on is, can these models function as an operating system for us? Here we are. We have logged in to this operating system. And again, there is no operating system. It's a generative AI. It is just generating output based on the inputs that we are providing. But to a very large extent, if you really think about it, the computer that you have, it has memory, but at the end of the day, it generates output based on inputs that you put in, or maybe other external inputs, but it generates outputs based on inputs. That is what these models are doing, and in theory, you could mimic an operating system. Or, to get a little crazy on you guys, you could have it be the operating system. To be honest, this is actually already further than I expected to get, because I've never even gotten this far, and it's already beginning to look like we can keep going. Let's try to navigate to the home directory and see what's there. Sure enough, it's just the Syntax user. Again, further than I've ever been. Surprisingly, it's working pretty well. Let's navigate to that user and see what's there. More of what we'd expect. Okay, enough navigating around. Can we create something in this operating system? Let's go ahead and make a directory called testing. And this is why it's currently very tough to do R&D. I'm cutting out most of them, but I'm showing this one at least. Some of the responses from any inputs that you have take milliseconds, which is what I suspect the true response rate for this model is. Other responses take quite a while and require multiple attempts. I think there's probably a queue for the public testing, and then it also will error out. So sometimes it'll take a while and still give you a result. Most of the time, if it takes more than like a second, it's going to probably throw an error and you just need to retry again. Either way, we can just resend the command, and sure enough, there's our testing directory now. Let's go ahead and head there next. At this point, we've shown that we can navigate this AI Linux system where it has things that we would expect if it was an actual Ubuntu system, and we can add new directories and then navigate to those directories. This alone is just super cool for a nerd like me, but I am curious, can we take it further? What else can we do here? And of course we can take it further. The next logical step would be, obviously, to create a Python script. To create a script, we have to edit that script, and I'm honestly not really sure how this is going to work, so I just nano a made-up file name, which would normally create that file and edit at the same time, essentially, and we see what happens. ChatGPT takes the lead here with how it'll work and just kind of notifies me that it understands this new file is opened in Nano. At this point, I've got goosebumps because now we are darn close. The thing is here, we need to edit the program and then let ChatGPT know that we're done. With Nano in an actual terminal, this would be a Control plus X after editing and a Y to save. So I'm just kind of guessing that maybe the square brackets would suffice in adding key press instructions like this. This is all my first attempt, and I'm just doing the first thing that comes to mind. It looks like maybe that did actually work, though. Let's see if the file is actually there. And indeed, there it is. But what good is a Python file if it doesn't run? It runs! Since the recording of this specific example, I was so excited. I also got an idea to edit a text file within that Python script to see, would that also work? Because the GPT model would have been at least made aware that that's what part of what that script does. And it did. So I posted a short video on that. I'll link to that in the description if you want to see that more. I mean, what can I say besides ChatGPT is impressively good? I think we're headed towards a future where the difference between AI systems and software compared to human-made and like traditionally logic systems and software is going to be like the difference between digital and analog capabilities that we know of today. It's the difference between a computer and an abacus. I don't think that we can even begin to fully grasp or predict what the future really looks like here, what the impacts will be, what will the pros and cons be, all of that. But I do know that a change is coming. If you're interested in taking part in this future directly and you want to learn more about neural networks and how they work, you know what I'm going to say. Check out our book on neural networks from scratch in Python without third-party libraries at nnfs.io. That's all for now on ChatGPT, but probably more to come in the future on it. I'd like to dive in deeper for sure with quite a few of these examples and some other examples that I was curious to get into. So anyways, stay tuned for that. Thanks for coming and hanging out, and I will see you all in another video.